The unforgiving sun blazed down upon the endless expanse of scrubland. Hidden beneath the gnarled branches of a dead mesquite tree, a young woman crouched in desperation. Torn strips of canvas and burlap were all that shielded her battered body from the world's harsh gaze. Her skin bore the telltale marks of violence, dried blood, purple bruises, and fresh cuts that spoke of recent horrors. Rose Bennett had seen only 24 summers, yet her eyes held the hollow stare of someone far older. She clutched the makeshift coverings with trembling hands, pulling her knees tight against her chest. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands, matted with dust and tears that had long since dried. Every inch of her told a story of brutality. Finger-shaped bruises encircled her throat. Welts crossed her back in angry red lines. A deep gash on her temple had crusted over with blood and dirt. This wasn't her first encounter with cruelty. Her husband, William, had made violence a daily ritual in their marriage. His possessive rage consumed him completely. A simple good morning to the postmaster would earn her a beating. Even looking up when another man entered the room meant a night of terror. Each assault grew more vicious, each threat more deadly. This morning had brought violence beyond her endurance. She had seized a desperate moment when he stepped outside, fleeing through the back door into the wilderness. With nothing but a thin nightdress, she had run barefoot across the thorny desert floor until her feet bled and her lungs burned like fire. The blazing heat nearly struck her blind. But escape was worth any suffering. She had believed no, prayed that she had finally broken free from her tormentor. But fate held one more cruel twist in store. A lone horseman had emerged from the heat shimmer, blocking her path to freedom. Though not her husband, the predatory gleam in his eyes carried the same menace. Rose had fallen to her knees, begging for mercy in a voice cracked with exhaustion. But kindness was foreign to his nature. The desert witnessed her struggle in terrible silence. She fought with what little strength remained, scratching, crying out, pleading with heaven, but her weakened body could offer no real resistance. He forced her down among the sharp stones and thorny brush. Her screams carried across the empty wasteland, but no living soul heard her desperate calls. When his violence was complete, the stranger mounted his horse and vanished into the heat waves without a backward glance. Leaving her broken and bleeding beneath the merciless sky, Rose had crawled to the skeletal mesquite. Gathering whatever scraps of cloth she could find scattered in the wind, pieces of old canvas, fragments of burlap sacking, anything to cover her shame and wounds. The rough materials offered little comfort, but they were all that stood between her and complete exposure. She wished the desert would open up and swallow her whole. She prayed for lightning to strike her down where she huddled. Every man she had ever encountered had proven to be a monster in different clothing. Her husband, its faceless attacker, both had transformed her life into an endless nightmare. Hours passed like years under the scorching sun. The vast emptiness stretched beyond the horizon, while hot wind stirred the dry grass around her refuge. Then, through the shimmering heat came the steady rhythm of approaching hooves. Rose's heart nearly stopped. She pulled the makeshift coverings closer, her entire frame shaking with terror. Had the rider returned to finish what he started? Had William somehow tracked her across this desolate landscape? A shadow fell across her hiding place. She forced herself to look up, expecting to see another predator ready to destroy what remained of her spirit. Instead, she found herself gazing at an older man with weathered features and kind eyes that held depths of compassion she had almost forgotten could exist. Daniel Garrett dismounted slowly from his paint horse. Moving with careful deliberation, he had seen enough broken souls in his 53 years to recognize the signs of recent trauma. The young woman before him clutched her coverings like a lifeline, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes from unspeakable experiences. "Easy now," he said softly, keeping his distance. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." Something in his gentle tone made Rose's trembling ease slightly. It carried no demands, no threats, only honest reassurance. Carefully, Daniel began removing his heavy work shirt, revealing the simple undershirt beneath. The outer garment was thick flannel, worn soft with years of honest labor. He approached slowly, extending the shirt toward her. "Here, this will cover you better than those scraps." Rose looked at the offered clothing, then back at his face, searching for any sign of deception or cruel intent. Finding none, she reached out with one shaking hand, while maintaining her grip on the canvas pieces with the other. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't take the cloth off." Daniel's expression softened with understanding. He knelt carefully at a respectful distance, holding the shirt out for her to take. "I won't remove anything you don't want removed. You're in charge here." But as Rose tried to maneuver the shirt over her current coverings, one corner of the canvas slipped from her grasp. In that brief moment, Daniel glimpsed what lay beneath the makeshift protection, and his blood ran cold. The sight that greeted him was worse than anything he had imagined. Her entire torso was a canvas of abuse painted in shades of purple, black, and deep red. Burns in the shape of a branding iron marked her shoulder. Knife cuts formed deliberate patterns across her ribs. What appeared to be bite marks dotted her collarbone. Daniel's hands began to shake as the full scope of her suffering became clear. This wasn't just the aftermath of one terrible encounter. This was evidence of prolonged, systematic torture. Someone had taken pleasure in causing her pain, had turned cruelty into an art form. Rose quickly pulled the canvas back into place, but not before seeing the horror in Daniel's eyes. She began to weep, expecting him to turn away in disgust or revulsion. Instead, he remained perfectly still, his voice thick with barely controlled emotion. "Dear God," he whispered, "what monster did this to you?" Through her tears, Rose found herself telling the truth to a stranger, something she had never dared do before. The words tumbled out like water through a broken dam. She spoke of William, her husband, whose jealousy had become a disease that consumed everything in its path. How he had started with simple slaps and progressed to elaborate tortures. How he had threatened to kill her family if she ever tried to leave or seek help. She described the branding iron he kept in their fireplace, how he would heat it red hot when his rage reached its peak. The way he used his belt buckle to carve patterns in her skin when she displeased him. How he would withhold food and water for days as punishment for imagined slights. Daniel listened in growing horror. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had fought in the war between the states, had seen men die in terrible ways, but nothing had prepared him for this level of calculated cruelty, inflicted on someone so innocent and defenseless. "That's not the worst of it," Rose continued, her voice barely a whisper. "This morning, when I tried to run, there was another man on the trail. He, ... She couldn't finish the sentence, but Daniel understood. The fresh injuries mixed with the old told their own story. His jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached, but he kept his voice gentle for her sake. "You don't have to say any more. I understand." Carefully, respectfully, Daniel helped Rose into his flannel shirt. The garment hung loose on her small frame, providing blessed coverage while allowing air to reach her wounds. He offered her water from his canteen and a piece of hardtack from his saddlebags, waiting patiently as she took tiny sips and nibbles. "My ranch isn't far," he said eventually. "You'll be safe there. I give you my word, no one will hurt you again while you're under my protection." Rose looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception. All she found was steady honesty and a deep well of righteous anger, not directed at her, but at those who had caused her suffering. For the first time in years, she dared to hope. The ride to Daniel's ranch passed in contemplative silence. Rose sat behind him on the horse, the flannel shirt providing modesty, while the desert wind began to dry her tears. The homestead that came into view was modest, but well-maintained, a testament to the honest work of a man who built things rather than destroyed. Daniel prepared a small room for her, complete with fresh water for washing and clean blankets that smelled of soap rather than fear. He left her alone to rest, but stayed close enough to respond if she needed anything. That evening, as lamplight flickered against the walls, Rose found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. "Why did you help me?" Most men would have, double quotes. Daniel looked up from the coffee he was preparing, his expression thoughtful. "My Sarah died 5 years ago. Cancer. Before she passed, she made me promise something. She said there were women out there suffering in ways most folks couldn't imagine. And if I ever had the chance to help one, I should do it without question or expectation. He handed her a warm cup. Careful not to let their fingers touch in case physical contact still frightened. Her Sarah was right about a lot of things. Guess she was right about this too. Over the following days, Daniel proved his trustworthiness through actions rather than words. He provided food and shelter without asking for anything in return. He tended to her wounds with the skill of someone who had doctored injured animals for decades. His touch, clinical and respectful. Most importantly, he never pressed her for details she wasn't ready to share. Rose began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long started to ease. She helped with simple chores when she felt able, finding peace in ordinary tasks like collecting eggs or tending the vegetable garden. But peace in the Wild West never lasted long. On the fourth day, the sound of galloping horses shattered the morning calm. Daniel stepped onto his porch, his hand automatically moving to the rifle he kept by the door. 3 riders approached at full speed, dust trailing behind them like a banner of violence. Rose appeared in the doorway, terror flooding her features as she recognized the lead rider. William Bennett sat his horse like an avenging angel, his face twisted with fury and wounded pride. Flanking him were 2 men she didn't recognize, hired guns by the look of their weapons and cold expressions. Rose. William's voice carried across the yard like a whip crack. "Get out here right now. You're coming home where you belong." Rose shrank back into the house. Daniel's flannel shirt pulled tight around her like armor. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He found me. Oh God, he found me." Daniel stepped protectively in front of the doorway, his rifle now clearly visible in his hands. His voice was steady as granite when he replied, "The lady's not going anywhere. She doesn't want to go." William's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Lady, you mean my wife?" The adulteress who ran off to play whore with the first man she met. The words hit Rose like physical blows. She knew William's tactics turn everyone against her by painting her as the villain in their story. Make her the problem that needed to be solved rather than the victim who needed protection. "That's enough," Daniel said firmly. "You're not welcome on my land. Turn around and ride out while you still can." One of the hired guns, a scarred man with dead eyes, nudged his horse forward. "Old man, you're outnumbered 3-1. Hand over the woman, and we'll let you keep breathing." Daniel didn't move. "I've faced worse odds than this and lived to tell about it. Question is, are you boys ready to die for another man's jealousy?" The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. Rose could see William calculating odds, weighing his options. She knew him well enough to recognize the signs of an approaching explosion, the way his hands tightened on the reins, the muscle jumping in his jaw. "You want to know what your precious Rose really is?" William snarled. "She's a lying, cheating whore who ran off the moment my back was turned. Found herself a sugar daddy, didn't you, Rose?" From inside the house, Rose's voice rang out with more strength than she had felt in years. "I'm not coming back, William. I'd rather die first." William's mask of control finally slipped completely. With a roar of rage, he spurred his horse forward, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. But Daniel was ready. The rifle shot echoed across the desert like thunder. William's horse reared as the bullet took the man high in the shoulder, spinning him from the saddle to crash heavily in the dust. The hired guns reached for their weapons, but Daniel had already levered another round into the chamber. "Next man who moves gets it in the heart," he promised, and something in his voice made both gunmen freeze. William writhed in the dirt, clutching his wounded shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers as he glared up at Daniel with naked hatred. "This isn't over," he gasped. "I'll be back. And when I come, I'll bring the whole town with me." Daniel kept the rifle trained on the 3 men as they helped William back onto his horse. "You come back here, and you won't ride away again." "That's not a threat. It's a promise." The 3 riders retreated. But not before William turned in his saddle to shout one final threat. "Enjoy her while you can, old man. When I'm done with you both, there won't be enough left to bury." As the dust settled, Daniel found Rose standing in the doorway, no longer cowering, but standing tall, despite her trembling. The flannel shirt hung loose around her frame, but she wore it with dignity rather than shame. "He meant what he said," she told Daniel quietly. "He'll come back with others. Men who believe his lies about what I am." Daniel nodded grimly. He understood the way small towns worked, how rumors spread faster than wildfire, how a man's word often carried more weight than a woman's truth. Then we'd better be ready for them. That night, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Daniel and Rose prepared for what might be their final stand. He cleaned his weapons while she gathered supplies and medical kit items. Neither spoke of the possibility that they might not survive what was coming, but as lightning began to flicker in the distance, Rose did something that surprised them both. She reached out and took Daniel's weathered hand in her own. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said softly, "I want you to know that these past few days have been the first time in years I've felt like a human being instead of a possession. Thank you for giving me that." Daniel squeezed her hand gently, the first physical contact between them that wasn't related to medical necessity. "Sarah would have liked you," he said. "She always said the strongest steel comes from the hottest fire." Outside, the storm was building, but inside the small ranch house, two damaged souls had found something worth fighting for: each other's freedom, dignity, and right to live without fear. The battle for Rose's life was far from over. But for the first time since her nightmare began, she wasn't facing it alone. And sometimes having one person willing to stand with you is enough to tip the balance between despair and hope.